How's it going, everybody? Episode 45 of The Main State of Mind. I'm your host, Justin Soderberg. This week, we're back at it with another episode of The Pull List featuring Paul Eaton of Galactic Comics in Bangor, Maine on Hammond Street. Paul joins us from week to week to talk comic books. We usually do a top 10 list of our favorite in a certain subject in comic books. This week, we talked comic book artists, mainly cover artists, and our top 10 favorite cover artists of all time. It's a very difficult one. There's a lot of covers out there. There's a lot of artists out there, and trying to pick those ones and put them in a list is a little hard. But we were able to do it. These are our lists, our favorites. There's reasons behind a lot of them. We had a great time. We enjoyed some beer, had a conversation, and talked comic book cover artists. Normally, most of my podcasts you can listen to on Spotify and Apple. Again, thank you guys for subscribing, for liking, for following, for commenting, for rating. But this one you might also be interested to watch it on YouTube because there is some visual aspects with the cover artists, obviously seeing their art. Not necessary, but worth maybe picking it up and checking it out on YouTube. You can also follow us and subscribe to us on YouTube. Themainstateofmaine.com is where you can find all those links. Episode 45, Paul Eaton, Galactic Comics, Bangor, Maine. Check them out online as well. This is the Pull List, our top favorite comic book cover artists of all time. Enjoy, everybody. Cheers, Paul. How are you?
Good. How you doing, Justin? Cheers.
I got my beer. I got my backup beer. I'm good. Got my
I came
list.
prepared.
I got my vaccine appointment Tuesday morning, 9:55 in the morning.
Nice.
I'm all excited. Get myself protected so I don't have to worry as much anymore, I guess.
That's good. That's good. The little one's coming.
Yeah. So we're here to talk about comic book stuff again, like we do all the time, which you do for half your job or one of your two jobs.
Yes. Yeah, half.
The more fun job, you talk comic books.
Absolutely.
Well, I guess that job now is mostly Pokemon cards with a little bit of comic books, but
it's a solid 60-40 between the Pokemon and the comics.
I don't know, man. I think your Pokemon store that sells comic books now.
Yeah, I have someone else who has the same fear. They're like, "Oh, come on, man!" And I brought manga in, and he's like, "I'm not liking where this is going." I'm like, "It'll be okay. It'll be okay."
We're rewatching rewatching a Big Bang Theory, and it's just getting to the point now where they're going to Stewart's comic book shop.
Yep.
And I was laughing because I was like, I love, like, how much research do you think they did when they went and made that comic book shop? Like, that is not what most comic book shops look like. It was way too put together, way too organized, way too new. It's like there's no comic book stores out there that are that well looking. Like, it's like
no, and this guy's like living in his mom's basement and can't get by, and his comic book store is worth like what, a couple $1 million probably.
It's beautiful, and it's like, no, this is not. No,
everything in stock you could want.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, and he's like this loser that can't get by. Oh, I don't know. I'm like, well, if you stopped ordering all of the museum quality statues in the backdrop, you'd be able to have more money.
And I just love that, like, Penny comes in and all the men are just like,
yeah,
and like, it's a stereotype. I go in every time I'm in your shop as a female in the shop, so it's like such a stereotype that a female doesn't go into a comic book store. But
nope.
So
and then everything stops if one comes in.
Yeah, exactly. Let's be honest, that's not true.
No.
But it's also different. I think, like what we talked about before, and I've talked with many other people, it's like it used to be a stigma, like it was bad to be a comic book fan or a Pokemon collector or a Magic the Gathering or any of the pops or any of those things. It used to be like a something you wouldn't tell people. Whereas now it's like you can be open about it. I can wear a comic book t-shirt. I can have comic book tattoos, and no one really like blinks at that. They're just like, oh, that's just normal society now.
Yeah, a lot of people are more interested in it. They're like, oh man, you're into this, huh? Oh, I started watching some shows. Can you explain this to me or that to me?
And I think we have Marvel, and I'll say that as a Marvel fan, but I do think it tends to a lot of the cinematic universes like Marvel and even DC's movies, and putting it on the big screen made it like, okay, this is a normal thing. I can like that. So
I would agree with that.
And I think all ages are liking it. I think there's people that my dad watches movies who could give two craps about a comic book in the world, and it's pretty cool to have that. So now we can talk openly about comic books, and no one gives a crap. So
That's right.
let's talk comic books. So we're here to do a poll list. This is a top 10 list that the Paul has put together his top 10 list. I put together my top 10 list. Some of them are easy, like not this list, but some lists are easy. Some are really difficult. This was probably one of the ones that was on the more difficult side.
I felt so.
And so we're going to talk about some Marvel, mostly Marvel for me, probably.
Wait.
Artists.
You're gonna have Marvel artists on yours?
I actually deleted him. He's in my honorable mentions now. There was someone that did do a lot for DC as well.
Oh,
But if you think about our artists nowadays too, though, it's like I
they're
feel like
not.
it's a lot different than even writers for books
Yeah.
uh the idea that they do switch back not back and forth, but maybe one started at DC, went to Marvel. Maybe they did Marvel at DC, another Image or IDW or something like that. But
Yeah, they bounce around a lot more than
they
they used to. It seemed like they
if
used to
you
be pretty stuck in something, and now they're kind of all over the place.
if you Google most of the names that I say or you say or whatever, it likely has a Marvel DC and or a Marvel Image, DC Image kind of
Yep.
thing. It's like those top three. It's like it's not they don't have exclusive contracts like they potentially used to, and now they start one place and there's no long term deals, and so they go back and forth. But some of my artists have been with the books they're writing or sorry books they're drawing for a long time. Like there's some artists that just like when you say the name, if you're a comic book fan, you go, that's that person from that comic book.
Yep.
Other ones are like, oh my God, I can't believe they drew for that book or they did a cover for
Right.
that book. That's like, I didn't know that. That's pretty cool. So, pretty excited to talk. I know there's probably at least one on name on this list that's probably going to be towards the top of both of our lists that we both have. So I'm excited to
Yep.
know at least one likely that we're going to be able to agree on, and we'll go from there. So if anybody hasn't listened to this podcast before, we do 10 through 6 really quickly. Paul reads his 10 through 6. Excuse me. I read my 10 through 6, and then we do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, back and forth. And kind of like just bust through the bottom 5 and then really dig into the top 5. And again, comic book artists, cover artists, whatever you want to call them. A lot of people who are comic book artists are like a lot of time they get their first crack, which you think is funny. I feel like a lot of people get their first crack at drawing covers.
Mm.
Would you think that I know it's a lot more work obviously for interiors, but you'd think that like the thing that sells the comic book is the cover. And you'd
And
think
that's
that you'd
pretty
have to
much
have
it,
something,
right?
yeah, you'd have to have some sort of like resume before you can get a cover. But there's a lot of people out there who got their first like big gigs are actually covers, which is pretty
Yeah,
cool.
they break into it
Um,
that way.
but again, it's one page, whereas interiors are 26 to 32 pages, so it's a lot more work.
Tons of work.
Um,
Yeah.
so let's get started, I guess. Want to read your 10
Right.
through 6?
Sure, I'll go first on this
Yeah.
one. All right. So I so a little bit on this. I had the hardest. I was still doing this list today.
Yep.
What have we been working on this for like a solid month, if not 5 weeks, maybe?
I think it's we go and I was trying to do the math on it. It's like 5 or 6 weeks between these episodes, and usually right after that's where we come up with the idea of the next episode. And so yes,
Yeah.
I would say 5 or 6 weeks, but we've been working on this.
And I've been working on this like it's been in the back of my mind. I've been thinking about it. I've been doing things with it, and up till this morning, I got up and was still working on it before I went to work. This has been like one of the hardest ones. And a little bit about this. So this list is for me. This is my top 10. My favorite. This isn't anybody's gonna say, "Oh, I can't believe this person's on your list, and that one's not," or anything like that. This was just ones that may specifically mean a lot to me for a certain reason. I'm not saying that this artist or that artist are by far the greatest cover artists of all time.
Yeah.
So looking at my top 10, I start with Jim Lee. I love his work. I absolutely love his Batman. I think he is probably my favorite Batman. So it's kind of funny as I got my list made out that he was number 10.
Mm-hmm.
But I absolutely love his Batman work, going through Hush and everything, and his X-Men, his Magneto. He has a lot of covers going up through my childhood that really were my turning point as superheroes.
Yeah.
So I got Jim Lee at number 10. Number 9 is Alex Ross. His work is phenomenal. He paints his covers. It's actually done in canvas and paint. the big thing with him is detail, and I absolutely love my go-to one is Silver Surfer. I think his Silver Surfer is amazing. It's really alien looking. He's very mirror based. There is a cover I just found of his that I'm gonna have to try to hunt down for my personal collection that is Thor, and it looks great. And Thor is angry, and he's got the hammer back. And when you look in Thor's like helmet, you see the reflection of Silver Surfer coming at him, and that like blows you out of the water.
And it's
I was
painted. It's like not even.
yeah,
It's like yeah. It
yeah,
baffles me.
yeah, and his detail work is incredible in it. Some my only problem with Alex sometimes is he draws them to be real, and there are flaws in them. And it's funny because of course I'm a big Batman fan. I cannot stand Alex Ross's Batman. I hate it. I don't like his Batman work at all because he's too flawed. But so to me, Silver Surfer is phenomenal. It's my favorite that he does. So after that is Frank Miller. Obviously, his Daredevil work, Daredevil 182, is such an iconic cover. I absolutely love it. I love RoboCop. It's my like all-time favorite movie. I love the series. I love his work on RoboCop and RoboCop's covers. So I love Frank Miller. His Batman stuff is phenomenal. I actually have a seen collection of DK3 covers, and I cannot stop buying them. It's an addiction that I'm not proud of. I swear I'm going to stop. I don't need these. They made so many variants of that, and every time I turn around, I buy another one. I can't help it. So Frank Miller is number. Where am I at? I have to count back. He's number 8. Number 7, I go to Larry Hama for my GI Joe love. His covers are. I don't know. There's something catching about them. They're always very actiony, and they always generally have a reflection of what's going on in the book. And it was great as a kid. It always sucked me right in. You know, you saw Storm Shadow or Snake Eyes on the cover, and something exciting was happening. So Larry Hama's work, I just always loved. And then I go to number 6 is Adam Kubert. I love his work, and really the biggest one that got me, my favorite cover of his, I put it up here in the background. I got this signed at Boston Comic-Con, is his Infinity, his Thanos. To me, that's Thanos. You know, everybody has their image, and I have a problem with Thanos in the MCU because I feel like he is too human. He looks, and some things his eyes are so human, versus Thanos is above an alien. Thanos is almost godly in nature. It's terrifying how far he's above, our species. And in the movies, they just didn't really capture that for me. And I love Adam Kubert's Thanos. It is, his eyes aren't really human. They're almost like, you can almost see space in them. They're glowing and they're bright. And he captures Thanos for me. So I could not have a list without him in it. So.
And I agree with you about the whole MCU Thanos. To me, when I saw him, like when they did that post credit scene with him, it was a little bit more towards what I would like him to see. And then they went to him and had more like a human head with the lines in his chin. And it was like he was a big body, but he had this tiny little head. And it's like, his whole body, the whole thing is big, and his head is huge. It almost should be like a football player. Like it should be like his shoulders are like he has on that cover. And the cool thing about that Infinity series that each cover was basically black with one color on it, black and white with one color on it for each of the stones or the gems. And so it's like, that's pretty cool. That too is like that one was the, there's the blue and there's the yellow and that whole series. We talked about that series before. That whole series is freaking amazing.
It's phenomenal.
I meant to say this at the beginning, but I'm just remembering this now when we mentioned that I wanted a little note for the last one we did, which is the story arcs. I haven't put it into my list yet, but I have to push it into that list of the top 10 story arcs, is the original Old Man Logan run. Like literally, I read that this past week, and it was one of those comic books that I read my comic books before I go to bed. And it was like, I don't want to go to bed. I want to continue reading this until this is over. And it was absolutely amazing. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I know we talked about that Infinity series during our story arcs. But Old Man Logan original series back in the Wolverine Volume 3 was amazing. So great list. I like it. What I will say is it won't ruin the top of it. Is I had Lee and Miller in my honorable mentions. Miller, honestly, up until about 15 minutes before we went press record, I actually had Miller in my list. But there was one person that I thought could give some credit for. So this list to me could have been 10 or 11, 12 people long.
I have a
And I would
huge
have
honorable
had,
mention to talk about after.
but because you mentioned those already, I will tell you they're not in my list, but they should be in a sense. But I will say when I get to that person, a little bit reason, they do deserve some credit, and I thought they should be pushed up. So my number 10 is Charlie Adler, who has drawn basically every Walking Dead issue since issue 7. And I don't, there's something about his drawing, and there's something about his, well, part of it's also something about the consistency of when you read a comic book, from cover to the back of the cover, that's the same every time. It's a continuation. And if the artist changes, I've read comic books before where you get to issue 10 and the cover artist or the interior artist has changed, and they look different, and I just don't like it.
Yep,
It's like, no, it's
it
not the
kills it.
person that I saw. Yeah, so something I give respect to. He makes people look comic bookish, and I understand the whole idea what you said about Alex Ross. That Adler gives you that real life human, but also that it's a comic book still. So their faces are more long and more square jaws and things like that, which is pretty cool. Number 9 is my love for Spawn. The only other person to ever want to do Spawn ever again would be Greg Capullo. Todd
Nice.
McFarlane's a great Spawn artist, but like if anybody can't do it, that he doesn't do it, he should do it. So Greg, for the Spawn covers he does. John Romita Jr. is number 8. I think that he took a lot from his dad. I just think he's better than his dad. And he did a lot of Spider-Man stuff. So it's like at the end of this, you realize that a lot of the people that I love for artists all had a touch on Spider-Man, which is kind of cool. And all took their own take on Spider-Man.
That's cool.
And the name that actually pushed this list around to make me put Frank Miller, which is really weird, out of this thing is Sarah Pacelli. I think she is up and coming in a sense. She's been around for a while, but she's done a great different Spider-Man covers. She's did a bunch of different Spider-Man interiors. I think she's unbelievable as an artist. And I think one of the things that we think about in this industry, we just mentioned before we press record about women being in your store and being in love with comic books, it helps with having someone who is a female who kicks ass at drawing and can do those covers and interiors like someone like Sarah does. She's at number 7.
I'm gonna have to look up her work. 6. I don't recognize the name. That's great.
And number 6 is again a last minute, like it's literally up to the buzzer beater here. I pushed him out of my top 5, but it's George Perez. George Perez has been a love of mine for a long time. I love how he draws Thanos, like you mentioned earlier, and about your number 6, Adam.
Number 6. Yep, Adam Kubert.
I love how George Perez drew Thanos in the Infinity Gauntlet, Infinity War series. And then I met George Perez again, like you said at the top. My personal list. That's your list. This is my list. I will tell you, when someone's lines look better is when you meet the person and they're an awesome human being. That also adds to a point how much I love someone's art. So George Perez and his the Infinity series and his version of Thanos, I love. He did a lot of like New Teen Titans for DC, and like we mentioned, a lot of back and forth. A lot of these artists did do both, but George Perez dropped out of my top 5. But there's a couple of reasons in there that we'll get to with my top 5. So George Perez is at number 6 for me.
His Wonder Woman work was phenomenal.
Oh yeah, and that's one of those things, and that's the difference with me and the DC Marvel thing, is that there's never been a problem with me and DC's art versus Marvel's art. I think the artwork is on par at both locations. It to me was the storylines and the character development and all that stuff that made me fall in love with Marvel over DC. But there's artists that had, like you mentioned, Frank Miller's probably artwork with DC was way better than his art with Marvel in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, probably arguably.
But people can say the opposite. George Perez, again, he did a bunch of New Teen Titans and all that stuff. He did some stuff. I think he did some Batman. But like he's done a lot of good stuff with DC that was excellent. But it's the artist, not the story. He's just drawing what these storylines should be. So it's not like I could ever fault someone for drawing for DC because you got to get a paycheck somewhere.
Well, it's funny too to talk about the attachment to people. And John Romita Jr. is not on my list because I went to his booth no less than 5 times at Boston Comic Con and never once actually got to chat with him, get an autograph. I was the next person in line, and they put up a buzzer thing, and they're like, "Yeah, so he's sketching now," and I'm like, "I've been in line for like an hour. Like, come on, man." So there's no way. I mean, sure, there was tons of people. You didn't recognize me after being here 5 times. Like Jason Aaron recognized me. Come on, man.
But that's the thing. It's
So
like, so I met George Perez at a small Comic Con, no bigger than Bangor's Comic and Toy Con, in right outside of Haverhill, Massachusetts, North Shore, Massachusetts, at a like armory, like some sort of small rinky-dink Comic Con. And I met Arthur Soydam, who did the Marvel Zombies
okay,
variant or
yeah,
covers. He did the
yep,
ones that were players on old covers. I have a bunch of those covers too. So he's in my honorable mention as well. But he was unbelievable. He's like, buy 2 prints, I'll sign whatever you want. And I ended up buying 4 prints from him. He did a realistic like art from the Walking Dead TV show.
nice.
So I bought those. I had those on the wall for the longest time. But $40, ready? $40 for a sketch in front of you from George Perez. He drew me Thanos in front of me with Sharpie and signed every book I had. So you could bring a long box. He'd sign the whole thing, $40.
That's amazing.
Like
That is
that to me was like,
incredible.
okay, this guy is real. And then
Yeah.
you go to the next booth over, and it was a photo with crap. Who played TV's Batman?
Adam West.
Adam West. $80 for a photo.
Yeah.
And then it was like $60 for his autograph. I'm like, is his autograph worth $60? Like he's a famous person, but like $60 for his autograph.
So as a kid, I would go to my father's house, and my father had cable, which I didn't have at home. And I would watch the old 66 Batman. And that was the first Batman I ever knew. And then Batman the Animated Series started shortly after that. So when I was going to Boston Comic Con, Adam West was scheduled. And I think I yelled like a little like teenage girl, like, I'm gonna be Batman. And then he sadly was diagnosed with cancer, and he
Yes.
passed away shortly after, and I didn't get to meet him. So I would have been stoked to get Adam West's
And I got a photo of him from a distance, but to me, it was like, again, and that's the reason we've had this conversation. I've had this conversation with Jay Cochran and the guys from
Yep.
Comic Con when we were on their live stream about how it changes how your perception of someone when you meet them and get to know
Very
them.
much.
And you realize that George Perez doesn't have a retirement from Marvel or DC.
No,
He doesn't have
no.
royalties as much as like Adam West still has royalties, and he was still acting at the time. That's the problem I had.
Oh
He was
yeah,
still on.
yeah. He was
He
doing a
still had
ton
recurring
on
roles on
Family
Family
Guy.
Guy,
Yeah,
and so it was like, to me, it was like, okay, man, this guy over here is like literally trying to make a living for his
yeah,
retirement, and he's charging me $40 to sketch in front of me, an actual
yeah.
drawing, and he's gonna sign. He signed like I think I brought like 5 books with me, but he signed all 5 books.
Still signed 5 books.
And it was like
That's awesome.
everybody else is like $20 a book, and it's like,
Yep.
okay, this guy is. And for that point on, he draws amazingly too, so that doesn't hurt.
It's incredible. His art's incredible.
But that also made him go like a little bit further up because he was also a cool person, and he doesn't
That's
do
cool.
cons anymore. He's not like, I think he was supposed to do like his last cons in 2020, and then he's getting older and more sickly, and so I think he's done. So that's also another cool thing for me is like, I've got the sketch I got 5 or 6 years ago, and he's never gonna do it again, which is pretty
That's
cool.
it.
So
That's it. That's cool.
but
Man.
what's the here your number 5 here? That's good.
So number 5 for me is somebody that I don't know if I've ever talked about this. I have a list, an ongoing list of things, because I own the store now, and it's a challenge because I'm a collector, and there's a million things that could walk through the door that'd be like, oh, I would love to have this. But I had to say, okay, for the well-being of the store, I can't keep everything. And I made a list of the things that I absolutely must have, and one of his books is on my list, is Neil Adams, Batman number 227. I absolutely love this cover. It is a phenomenal cover. If it ever walks through the store, it will be mine. I would love to collect all of the homages of it, everything. I love Neil Adams' work. So if you don't know the cover, it is it's Batman, and he's kind of like in the moon, and it's almost like, I don't know, to me it seems like old school horror, like an old school back like 40s 50s horror movie. And it's a castle, and I can't remember, it's the Hounds, and there's a girl running towards you, running away, and this guy's chasing her with these dogs, and in the background up over the castle is Batman, knowing that he's gonna get this guy, he's gonna be the hero, he's gonna get it all. So that is like the most iconic thing to me. I absolutely love that cover. I love Neil Adams' work. I still, to this day, have some Neil Adams in my collection of the newer stuff. that comes out. So Neil Adams is my number 5 for being such a huge, iconic piece to me for Batman. So.
And if anybody's like, if you're listening to this, obviously, I'm glad you described it because it's definitely, you described it pretty well. If you're watching this on YouTube, which I recommend everybody subscribe and watch on YouTube, I'll have a picture of that up on the screen too, so you can see it. His number 5 for Neil Adams was it Batman 227? You said
227. Which if I could, it would be right here right now.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd be happily showing it off.
So
someday
my number 5 is a little obscure for most people. I don't know if most people know this person's name. But to me, it was back in 2015 during that Marvel, the Secret Wars time when they were kind of rebooting and doing a lot of number ones again, that I fell in love with this specific cover. And in my mind, I was like, again, I'm more of a novice. I was collecting a little bit, but it was like just getting into collecting diehardness, like within a couple of years later. It wasn't until like 2017 where I like dove feet first into collecting, where I'm at your shop every week and all that stuff. Before it was like, I was living in Massachusetts, and Newbury Comics had like half off Marvel. It was like 2-3 months of half off all Marvel covers. And I was like, okay, I get a $2 comic book. This hell yeah, I'll start collecting. As I fell in love with this cover. And then I realized that most of the series he did, it wasn't until more recently that most of the series he also did the covers for that are amazing. And that's Michael Del Mundo. And he did the covers for Carnage #1.
Oh, yes.
With it's Carnage's face and the railroads in between it. And then I also have now, I purchased on eBay, is Carnage #9 in this series, which the reason I love him is because it's more like, who did the new recent Spider-Man covers that are really popular? Do you know the Carnage one recently? I'll figure it out.
Was it Paul Gleason?
Something like, I don't remember. It sounds familiar. It sounds right. Whatever. It's like more like lines and webbing and spider webs. Whereas the same thing with these two comic books, it's like, it's obviously the symbiote, in there, making the face around the railroad tracks and the like mine shaft. And the same thing here. It's a lot more bubbles and lines, and it's not like clean drawn. Yeah. There was something about it that drew me to it. There was like, he can make something out of nothing in a sense. And it's like, it's Carnage's face that's supposed to be waves swallowing this thing. It's Carnage's face supposed to be being a mine shaft. And it's like, as you know, Carnage is one of my favorite villains. And so it just all made me fall in love with this. One of these days I'm gonna have Jay, I think, tattoo this Carnage #1 on one of my shoulders.
Nice.
The top of it, and the mine shaft would be down here. I think that would be cool. So Michael Del Mundo became one of my favorite artists by just literally this one issue was one of my favorite. I own 2 copies of it. They're not worth anything. I just was like, I need 2 copies of this. I need to put one so they're in the order 1 through whatever, and I need the other one so I have it on display.
That's awesome.
And so Michael Del Mundo probably isn't on a lot of people's top 10 lists, but I realized that he does a couple different art covers for people, and I absolutely fell in love with it. So Michael Del Mundo is number 5 for me.
So I can at least say I immediately recognize the cover.
Yeah, so, and that's the thing is I think it's also one of the things I think as we get into our top 5s, like you just mentioned the Neil Adams one to 1, I think a lot of these people are now going to get to the point where you're going to recognize who these people are by their art, not by their name.
Yeah, and I had a hard time with this list. I had so many covers in my mind that I have in my personal collection I absolutely love. And I realized that I collect covers, a lot of them based on subject matter.
Yeah.
So I'd go and I love this cover, and I thought it was another artist because I'm like, well, it looks a lot like this artist. And I looked and I'm like, oh, that's not them. And then I looked for more art by this person, and this might be the only cover they really did that made any impact or anything. So I'm like, well, you can't really try to put them on a list for one cover, right?
Exactly.
So it's really hard. I had a hard time with this. So anyway, so going on to my number 4 is, and I mentioned him previously in our discussion, I think on Story Arcs, is Tim Sale. Tim Sale, I love his work. I love he does. How do you want to say it? He creates a lot with very little. And that's why I love his Batman work. Because to me, Batman, I love when he's sort of faded into the shadows. So you go through Long Halloween, and there's all of these little touches of Batman characters and stuff, but it all surrounds the holidays. And I love how he takes that and sort of wraps it into the Batman story, but then it's almost hidden in there, here and there. So I absolutely love Tim Sale's work. I love his Batman. I love Daredevil Yellow, Spider-Man Blue. I am attracted to his covers. They're simplistic. There's something about them that aren't heavily detailed, but leave a lot to that imagination. And I love his work. So I had to go number 4 on my list being Tim Sale.
And so it's great how you mentioned Long Halloween, because didn't they just cast voices for the new movie of animated film that's coming out with
Which
Batman the Long Halloween?
I will be stoked to see,
I
because it's
know.
my
So like,
all.
if
I
you
mean, I
listen to
have
the story arc episode, it's one of Paul's favorite story arcs of all time too.
yes, it
so
is. I have a 6-foot. Give you an idea. I think it's 6-foot shelf at home that my trades are on, and one entire 6-foot shelf is Batman. That's how many Batman trades I have, and of all of them, Long Halloween is my favorite.
Well, and that's the thing. So we mentioned Batman. This is cool. I like this idea. We haven't got to our full list yet, but the cool thing I will mention in this middle part here, as we get to my number 4, is it seems like what's pretty cool is you are defining the cool people who drew Batman. Like Batman's been mentioned a couple of times, right?
Looking at my list, it more or less is, yeah.
And if you look at mine, it's the people who drew Spider-Man. And so as we get through this list, it's like I just looking at the couple of people that have drawn John Romita Jr., Sal Bercelli. Like it's that aspect of, if you draw this character well, then I'm going to say okay. If you can do a badass cover with Spider-Man, or you can do a badass cover of Batman, you can do okay. It's not this obscure. If you made this obscure comic book, no one knows what this character looks like. You just created it. If you're a good artist, you can make it look good. But if you can make, like, I know what Carnage looks like, so Michael Del Mundo's version of Carnage, I'm like, okay, you kick ass making Carnage. So that's pretty cool to hear.
Inventing this character in another way.
Number 4 for me is one you've already mentioned. It's Alex Ross. So I fought to push him. Like the reason you said about the realisticness and all that stuff, to push him further down the list, so there's closer to 10, because of the fact that I feel like, this is gonna sound mean, but painting doesn't belong in comic books. Not in a sense, like
interesting.
I don't like you're gonna clip that out and say that is the quote from Justin here on this podcast, but is that it's not what I expect at a comic books, if that makes any sense.
Very
like
different.
You expect pencil, you expect inks, you expect those things. You don't expect painting. And so, but every time I look at one of his covers, I'm like, damn, this guy can do it. Like he makes it happen. So like House of M, who's the art? I have it right here. So House of M's cover, I don't have it here.
It looks like Alex Ross.
It says it looks like an Alex Ross.
Yeah.
But Alex Ross is better. And that's my point. So it's like you have that painting-esque of Alex Ross, who has that painting version, but he just does it far better. And I wish it's like funny. Like I mentioned that I have comic books. I have my 5 through 1. I have a comic book cover of everybody but Alex Ross. Yeah, so he makes it look realistic. Like, damn, this guy could pay me a painting for my wall. I will buy a Alex Ross painting.
Can you imagine how amazing that would be?
But to me, it's like, okay, there's a reason why it's at that weird spot. Number 4, Alex Ross is so good at his Immortal Hulk's covers are amazing. His Captain America covers have been amazing. More recently, and he's a badass artist. So I had to put him in my top 5. But reason, like I said, I want to push him further up to 10 or whatever, to 6 or 7, because I don't expect that when I see a comic book art. It's like I want to see that inks. I want to see those lines. I want to see that fakeness. Like make it look real, but also fake, because it is a comic book. And it's part of me that's, like I said, is that in the middle thing. So, but his art is so dang good that I had to put him in number 4. I couldn't. Maybe he could swipe with my, like in the long term, like years later, probably would switch to the 5. And Michael Del Mundo becomes my number 4. He probably could be switched right now. But like I said, Alex Ross is such an amazing cover artist that he had to be in my top 5. So Alex Ross at number 4.
His work's incredible. It really is. And for anybody who is watching this, if you look around in the background, there are hidden covers from some of my lists. So if you are watching, I tried to tuck them in here and there in the background. So.
And they're all for sale. So at Hammond Street in Bangor. Make an offer.
I'm really disappointed if they show up, because I gotta tell you, these are all for my personal collection.
I say if you show up, if you say this podcast and you show up, I want to cut out whatever sales they get.
All right, so my number 3 is Gabriel Delgado. He's been very, very big in the scene recently. His realism that is as we're talking about Alex Ross, I feel like it's very realistic, but then he mixes that comic in it so well that you're getting a good blend of the two. I love his work on Spider-Man. Gabriel Delgado Spider-Man is phenomenal. So that is why he is my number 3. Every time I see his work, it's just like mind blowing. Love his stuff. So that is why I've got Gabriel Delgado at number 3.
I was trying to look up. While you were doing that, I wanted to see who drew the cover for
I feel like
House of M.
I feel like it was an artist that I would not be able to pronounce their name if I remember correctly. I could be completely wrong.
Okay, so let's see here.
Let's see what you come up with.
Hard to find. Illustrated. Okay, the book itself was illustrated by Oliver Coppola. Yeah, it doesn't have the art. For me, I just was like bothering me. It's on the it's probably on the list of names. I just don't know which one's
which one's the cover art.
The only name I know on that entire list that I know what they did was Brian Michael Bendis.
Yeah.
But a good number 3. I like that. I like your idea. Like I said, if for some reason I don't change what you do, Alex Ross, you're never going to hear this podcast. But if you ever did, don't change what you do. But I do like you say about Gabriel Delgado that he's got his realisticness to it, but also knowing it's a comic book. Like,
yeah,
Ross paints like he was painting a portrait of you and I.
Yeah,
it paints it just like that, and it's like, well, I kind of also want, like, I love my MCU movies, but there's also this part where I read my books. I want them to be comic books. I want to lose myself in that world and have that little bit of break. And it's just like,
you want them to be a little bit above, a little bit bigger and more,
a little bit more cartoony in a sense, like not. And as I get into the top list, there's some reasons you'll hear obviously my picks on that. So number 3 for me jumped in 2020 to 21, jumped from number 10 on this list if I were to make it last year to number 3.
Wow. All right.
Ben Bishop.
Beautiful.
Ben Bishop. So Ben, Ben doesn't have time to listen to my podcast anymore. Will and I were talking about this. He's been on it multiple times, but he's not going to have time to listen to this. So Ben, if you're listening, awesome. Great work. Thank you. But I was talking to Will last night in your shop, and I mentioned to him that there's something about Ben Bishop that more recently, again, I think part of it has to do with what I mentioned with George Perez, meeting the person, getting to know the person, and knowing how awesome he is with his fans. But really, when I read Last Ronin number 2, so Last Ronin number 1, he had 1 page, and I knew which page it was. You could not have to tell me. The second I got to that page, I was like, that's a Ben Bishop page. Nice. And then I got issue 2, and I'm flipping through that issue 2, and every couple of pages it was Ben's. And I was like, why didn't they just hire Ben to do this whole book? Nothing against the brothers that do the rest of the book. I just think that Ben's lines in his comic books and on his covers, he doesn't use ink. It's pencil and then thicker pencil. And he has these thick lines that just make it, and he's got square jaws on his way he draws the turtles, his square jaws, and the way he does it. There's something about what he does that draws me into his covers and in his interiors. Ben's going places, and I think that I got to give a shout out to Ben. He is amazing with his fans. I am part of his Bish Kids. I won't lie. I do send him money every month, and a couple weeks from now, I'll get a box from him that has a bunch of cool one-off stuff in it. But that has nothing to do with what I think about his art. I think that the Ninja Turtles and IDW is stupid if they don't give him actual work in the future. I think that what he's been able to do with Last Ronin, what he's been able to do with Kevin Eastman and Drawing Blood and his aggregate series is awesome. Just everything he does, it touches is gold, because again, there's the way he draws. And I think there's something to say about someone who draws unique enough that I can notice it's his. That if you think about all the artists that we've talked about either now or coming up in our top 2 or top 3, most of those people were like, we can't, that drawing's not good enough for us. Like, I guarantee you, when he sent his stuff into Marvel, they're like, your lines are too thick, or your jaws are too square, or, you need to use ink, not just pencil. but that's what's going to make him unique and different. Like,
Yep.
it's that aspect that I'm sure there's probably a story where Alex Ross sent his art into somewhere and they're like, no, you're sorry, yours is too realistic.
Yeah.
Got declined. And so there's something that's going to make it stand out. And there's a future for Ben. And if anybody hasn't read The Last Ronin, like, it is some of the best comic book work, writing and artwork from both Ben. And I forget that I think there's two brothers that do the other artwork on the thing, but the whole thing is amazing. And it's honestly became bad luck because the guy who was originally supposed to do the flashbacks couldn't do it because of the delay of the comic book. And that's how Ben got the role of doing it, because Kevin Eastman gave him a little shout out and said, you should have Ben do it. And it's probably made it to the point where he's too busy for, anything he's doing now because of his work on Last Ronin and all that stuff. So Ben Bishop became a number 3. This is my Last Ronin number 2 variant with his sketch there on it. This is
Awesome.
proudly displayed in my books, and I will always be happy to read and look at a Ben Bishop cover or interior. Again, I look at it. If anybody's read Last Ronin number 2, you can tell which pages are his and which pages are someone else's, and there's something about it. So I'll stop fanboying over my boy Ben. If you're listening to this podcast or watching it, he's been on twice. Go back and listen to his episodes. He'll hopefully be on again soon to talk Last Ronin. But Ben is number 3 for me.
That's awesome, man. Awesome. And I absolutely love Ben's work. It's phenomenal. Shout out. Going to my number 2. Oh, hey, cheers. We're drinking the same beer. By the way, so a little bit about my beer drinking. I have had 500.
A little bit about my beer drinking. I am not an alcoholic.
I'm not an alcoholic, but I have had somewhere around 500 different beers from around the world. Yeah. I used to tell you this. I collect everything. I can't help it. I'm a beer collector.
That's why I'm not doing Pokemon cards, man.
Come on, get in on this. You know you want to.
You're just trying to get more money out of me.
So I have had just tons of beer, different beers all around the world, different beers. And I gotta tell you, so every little thing, this new one that you guys have made up at OBC, I have to say is probably going to be my favorite beer. This is amazing.
It's dangerous.
It is so good.
It's so amazing. And it's something that we keep on. When I brought it to you, as I brought you a can.
Yep.
Usually I swing by every couple of weeks to Paul's shop, buy some comic books, throw him a 4-pack of cans. And this week I was
Colton. Thank you, Colton, for the 4-pack.
So he gave you a 4-pack. So I was like, and it was funny because I'm glad I didn't bring a 4-pack because he would have you would have had 8 cans. And I'm like, we don't have not that we don't have a ton, but it's like, this beer is going to fly. Like, this beer is so good and people are going to love it so much. And then, and, not that Paul's not worth it. It's just, it was like, I'll bring a can. Cause I only brought 2 cans home for me. So usually I have a 4-pack. But I tell you what, it's on draft at Orono Brewing Company in Orono, and I get a shift pint at the end of my shift every week or every night. And I will be drinking that a lot because it's unbelievable. So you can get it at your local stores, not to shout out to OBC. But yes, so I'm glad you're drinking that. Cheers.
Cheers.
Every little comic book counts.
That's right. It does too.
At one point we'll do a Galactic Comics beer, right?
Yeah, that's the goal. Galactic beer, man. We need it. This is phenomenal. This is amazingly good.
And shout out to Bissell because of the Bissell glass. I will give Bissell credit. We love Bissell. Yep.
I got my Bissell glass going.
Maddie Robinson, tasting general manager of Bissell, was on the podcast. Good friend of mine. So
I love Bissell beer. It's fantastic. But this is I think out of over 500 beers, this may be my favorite. It is incredible. It is so good. And you guys actually have my second. What was my favorite that you'd made back when you first opened? And I am never going to pronounce the name of it right. Pocatello.
Pocatello. It's one of my favorite beers we've ever made. It will never be made again.
It will never be made again. And it was so good. Oh my god.
It was so good, yeah.
Every time I get to nerd out about beer, I talk about that beer. It was like the greatest beer of my life, and I'll never have it again. It's terrible.
By the way, Colton's gonna love the fact that you mentioned his name on this podcast.
All right, Colton.
You know that he listens to the podcast, and he's told me he wants credit. Last time I mentioned him on the podcast with I forget who it was. It's a couple weeks ago. I did a podcast and I mentioned him on it, and he was like, dude, am I get credit for me? You mentioned my name on it. Do I get royalties? I'm like, yeah, the second I get paid, I'll let you have some money. So Colton, you get me some sponsorships, I'll pass along some money for mentioning your name on.
Yeah, I like that plan. It's a good deal.
But
all right, back to comics. Now
yes,
we've had
exactly.
a beer podcast. So my number 2, I have it back here, is Francesco Mattina.
Yes.
His work is phenomenal. If you are not familiar with his work, and I'm gonna tell you right now, go look at Spawn. His Spawn stuff is incredible. It's amazing. It draws you in. It's sort of, I don't know. There's something about it that's sort of a little horror based. There's a lot of dark in it. His Batman. There was a Francesco Mattina Batman collection I had when I first opened Galactic Comics, and it was from the Metal series, and the covers like drew me in, and I absolutely loved them. I had the Virgin and I had the black and white. And one day I said, you know what? These have been up for about a week or so. They hadn't sold yet. And the store was, it was small. I was working out of my office in my home, and I said, I'm going to keep those. That's going to be my first, I'm going to pay myself. And I went downstairs that morning and opened up the system, and there they were sold. And I was like, damn it. There they went. But Francesco Mattina's work is incredible. His Batman stuff is amazing. I cannot say enough about his Spawn work. The colors, the contrast, the darks, the greens, everything he does is just amazing work. And of course, so a little bit. I think we talked about this in villains, right? And I don't list him as a villain, but my favorite is Magneto.
Yeah.
So the Magneto cover on there, and this is the Venomized version with him choking out Spider-Man.
And so I will say, yes, there's 3 people that are allowed to draw Spawn in my book. It's Todd McFarlane, Greg Capullo, Francisco. Those are the people allowed to draw Spawn. No one else is allowed to draw Spawn. There's something about it, but yes, I agree completely with your number 2. I love it. It's awesome. I love it, dude. Spawn's got some love on this podcast today. I tell you what, I'm happy about that because Spawn was like one of the original characters that I like to follow a lot. It was one of the original ones that I was so proud to have number 1, and so on. So I tell you what, Paul, I would love to collect the black and white copies of Spawn. I don't know what's going on there, but I might have to go to the other comic book shop in Bangor.
Oh, that's terrible. So, Ryan, if you're listening to this, Ryan, if you followed the podcast from Galactic Comics, there's another person that would like to have one of these black and whites. If you can fork one over, I'll have to talk to him and say, come on, man, can you hook Justin up?
Black and whites.
Because they are exclusive stores.
There's something. Here's my thought on this. And you talked about the covers for Francisco, and we talked about Greg Capullo and all that stuff. It's like, there's something about, and then as we get into number 2, number 1, there's something about simplicity, and I don't know. There's something about how much I love Spawn. Honestly, I would love for them to do an animated Spawn TV show that on HBO or Hulu or whatever that was just black and white. I know there's like
my all-time favorite, RoboCop.
Yeah,
and I feel like a lot of the RoboCop flaws in the comics have been there's too much color in them.
Yep.
The RoboCop, I would love to see Sin City style, black, white, and one color here and there. The blue with the red lighting up the wall from the police car, the gunfire, blood. Something, just those basic things. And Spawn, the best thing of him is when you don't see him.
Yep.
The billowing cape, that little bit of red on the edge, those glowing green eyes that are terrifying from the corner, Those scenes of Spawn are the ones that get you. You're like, oh, yeah. And that's my thing with Batman. I want to see less of Batman, not more of it.
Correct. Yes, exactly.
Fades into the shadows, this, creature of the night, the avengeful thing that's always watching.
So we're going to do a great little segue in here to my number 2.
All right.
Todd McFarlane. So Todd McFarlane, I'll say it right now, is the best person to ever draw Spider-Man. Is the best person to ever draw Spawn. My thought was to put Spawn covers to be my description, my thing, but I went with, first Venom cameo, first Venom in costume, $2.99, $2.98 Spawn covers from back in Marvel. I would have loved for him to stay with Marvel. obviously as a big Marvel fan, but because he left Marvel, we got Spawn. So I will say there's a better good things to happen over years. I just love because Spider-Man is not a real person, right?
Yeah.
So he's not a human being. He's not like he's a human being in the Marvel universe, but he's not real. And so the way that he was able to make him contort into different spots that he wasn't allowed to do originally made him more superhero to me, made him more unrealistic to me, but also kept him in the world because of the storylines because of how he was still a high school student and so on and so forth. Um, there was something about him that drew me into him. I've talked about it in my top story arcs. I've talked it in my favorite villains. Todd McFarlane sucks at writing. I just say it out now. He's not good at writing comic books.
Thank you for saying that.
He's not good. It's so hard. I love the storylines behind Spawn. Like if you give me a synopsis of Spawn and I was explaining what Spawn was to a person, loved it. Him actually writing speech bubbles and actually trying to get continuity through a comic book is
All the
horrible.
early
It's
stuff
like
was
pulling
such a
teeth to try to read it.
struggle. It's such a struggle in the early stuff.
But he draws it. The way he draws and the way he draws Spawn. I don't think Spawn could be Spawn without the way that Todd McFarlane drew him in the first place. It's because he's not a real person. So Todd McFarlane at one time was my number one for the longest time. There's just some way I like his lines and the way he draws Spider-Man, the way he draws Spawn, the way he draws his villains in Spawn and all those things. So there was a break, and it honestly hurt sales of Spawn for a while there that Todd stopped doing artwork for Spawn altogether, didn't do the variant covers, didn't do any covers or whatever. And they're the hardest comic books to find because no one bought them.
Insanely rare. They're insanely rare.
Because there was like 5 issues ordered it. Like Galactic, you would order, like, I'll order a comic. Do you want Spawn? I'll get you 1 issue. That's it. We're not going to get any more because I'm not going to sell it. And so there's that like Spawn 170 or something like that, all the way up to 270, where he didn't touch it. And some of the writing was better when he had other people writing. But there's Todd McFarlane will always be that. And and we're not talking overall top people who have impacted comic book history, but Todd McFarlane has a stamp on this industry.
By far.
He has a stamp on sculptures and statues and figurines and comic books and image, Marvel, sports stuff.
I have a collection.
We're both sports fan. We know that.
Figures.
Yep. He was the one that epitomized hockey figurines, like sports figurines. If you go buy a basketball, hockey, football figurine, in all likelihood, it came from McFarlane Toys. Like it's
and if it didn't, it's not very high quality.
No, exactly. If you want a realistic looking thing, it came from that. So, and I'm looking forward to the future of the Spawn universe and all those things he's going to be able to do with this stuff. I can't wait for the new Spawn movie to come out. So I just, to me, it's always that Todd McFarlane could never do wrong. He did wrong because he's dropped a spot in my list over the years, but there's just something about the way he drew Spider-Man and then how he draws Spawn that always has pulled me in to Todd McFarlane. So as much as I like Francisco's Spawn, as much as I like Greg Capullo's Spawn, the number one Spawn draw artist of all time is obviously the creator, and that's Todd McFarlane.
So, funny thing, he wasn't on my list because I don't really like his Marvel work.
And that's okay. And that's the reason why he's not like, that's the reason why he was questioned all at the beginning. Yep. There's something about it, and anybody watching can see this. There's something about the way that he can contort this body to look like that no one else was before him. No one did that. It was a simple, like, oh, his mechanics can't do that. He's a human being. It's like, well, he's also fake.
And you have to, like, Spider-Man is like the most flexible being practically in all of the universe, right? Like, he's crazy, and that's a cool thing to Spider-Man. That's why. So when I was a hockey goalie, my mask was Spider-Man, because you know, Superman, great, he's fast and he's all this and that, but Spider-Man, he's so like agile, right? And he has that spider sense. Like, finds maybe a better goalie than Spider-Man. Like, I mean, his agility and his crazy like moves and things he can change. So I do appreciate it. I'm gonna tell you what, you've impacted me enough that I'm gonna have to go read Todd McFarlane Spider-Man, because.
And here's the deal: you had Liam Miller in your top 10, and I had him in my honorable mentions. I have no problem with Todd McFarlane at least moving into your honorable mentions and being in that spot, saying, okay, he's a good artist. He's just not my top 10. Here's just, I think he broke some boundaries in a sense with the way that he was able to say, no, this guy is a superhero. He can stretch in different spots. He can move in different ways than anybody else can. And that's what ultimately got him basically kicked out of Marvel. I mean, when he wanted to do his own thing, and they
Yeah.
ended up saying like, oh no, you can write your own book. And I'm like, no, why'd you let him do that?
Yeah.
Let him draw. There's definitely artists who are great writers.
Yeah.
This is not a one track thing. Frank Miller,
Yep.
unbelievable artist, unbelievable writer. But there's also some people that should stay in their lane. And in my opinion,
Yeah.
create the storylines. And
Let somebody else run with it.
Robert Kirkman doesn't draw Walking Dead, if that
Right.
makes any sense. I think
Yep.
he's one of the greatest writers of all time. He's not going to try to do artwork. It's just not his thing.
So I have recently made a very, very, very poor life choice, and have started personally collecting omnibus.
I was to say, you opened a comic book store.
No, that's hopefully going to be the best life choice here, with the exception of marrying my wife. Who she won't listen to this. I can tell you right now, but I'll say that. All right. Besides marrying my wife, we'll be opening the comic store. But I started collecting omnibus, so I will now have to go get. I believe there is a Todd McFarlane era Spider-Man omnibus, and I will add it to my personal collection and read this because you've inspired me for it. So
before you get into, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was like, before you get into number one, I don't go into number one yet until I say something. But continue what you were saying.
Okay, so what you inspired me previously. We discussed story arcs and Civil War, and I made a horrible life choice with this omnibus collecting and saying, okay, I'm on a Civil War. Well, Civil War isn't an omnibus; it is actually it's a jacketed collection of all of the books, and they are like insanely scarce. So I said, you know what, I'm gonna get this, and now that's a quest that I'm on, only so I can have it and read it, because I went back and reread stuff about Civil War, and they say that if you read all of it, it is so much deeper and more to it than simply reading the trade, because I read the trade. So I said, all right, I'm going to get the entire thing. But now you've got me on a quest to find that damn thing that I found one. I found one it sold, and it was for a decent amount of money. But I said, I'll spend that much. And I found one for sale. I put up a please, anybody got this thing? And the guy came back to me. I'm like, holy crap, that's way more than I want to spend.
And you're right about the whole Civil War thing, though, because like we mentioned on the storyline thing, you mentioned with, I think it was House of M or one of them, all the front lines. I'd love for Disney Plus to do a front lines, like an episode on TV about the journalist.
Yeah.
Or the, if it's something with EMT or something, someone in the background, but it's on the front line.
Yeah, these people
superhero.
Stuck dealing with all this.
And that's what Civil War had. That's what I think Secret Wars potentially had. There's a bunch of different ones that they had these front lines. And reading, it's Secret Invasion. There was there's a lot that go into it, but it's worth it because I think, like you mentioned, you get the whole picture. And we mentioned during our story arcs episode,
perspective of all of it with those frontline books. And I'd be interested to see what Civil War is like on all of it. So I'm now on a quest to find that, and now I'm gonna have to add the Spider-Man omnibus, which is, collecting omnibus. I gotta tell you, that's probably not the best life choice I've ever made. I didn't realize they are borderline print to order. So there are not a lot of them to come by. They don't sit around. You can't get them once they're gone. They're out of print, and once they're out of print, they become an astronomical amount of money. So I am gonna have to sell a kidney. I don't think I can need two of them. It'll be fine.
It was funny though. I was in your shop a couple weeks ago, and someone was like, "Oh, I gotta stop collecting cards; it's taking up too much space." I'm like, looking at it, and I'm like, "You obviously don't collect comic books or trade paperbacks. Cards take up this much space. Comic books are 8 times the size." I'm like, "Okay, stop collecting cards then." I'm like, "That was space." Collecting omnibuses is probably a little bit more than both of those. So
you're plus pages on average. Yeah, they're beefy. But I love that whole, like, the completeness, being able to sit there and just have all of it at my fingertips. So yeah, the omnibus collecting has started.
Well, when you gave me that, and I'll tell you, I was going to text you a little while ago. I downloaded the digitally copy on Comixology or something like that for the Long Halloween, and I think I did
Thanks for your support.
Dark Knight Rises. So here's the thing. It was like, I can't. I gotta put money into where I wanna, like, like that.
Yeah,
I
I mean, you're not a
obviously
DC guy. Why would you
no,
want
I
to
gotta
buy
put
those
money
things?
into where I want to spend money, and that's where like me buying. You text me every once in a while, like you did today. Hey, I've got this covered. Do you want this? I'd rather spend the
Yep.
money on that than something that I'm gonna read once or just
Yeah.
read to read than collect. And so I was like, oh, so I got it. I haven't read most of it yet, but I've actually got it and started looking into it. Dark Knight Rises, stuff like that, so I can at least get some groundwork on that DC side. I don't think it's gonna ever pull me completely
We're turning
over.
him.
But
We're turning him.
I think if you to be a comic book fan, you have to have a little bit of open mind in
Yeah,
general. And
absolutely.
I mean, this year was the first year I bought a Boom comic book, so it's like it's definitely opening me up to more things. Obviously, right now I'm basically Marvel and Image is my two main things, and
Yeah.
IDW here and there for TMNT stuff. But yeah, so I'll tell you, these things help. This is almost
Yep.
like our free, talking to a psychiatrist here to help us with our lives here.
Expand your
So
horizons.
the reason I wanted you to stop before your number one is we both know where both of our number ones are, right? I mean, we have to think that we know what
I don't
number
think
one
you
is.
know mine.
Okay, so yeah. So what I was gonna say is instead of just saying it out loud, we'll let Paul you get some time, and then we'll just go back and forth on this one. So
Yeah.
guys, I mean, let's be honest. I'm guessing your number one is Scotty Young.
My number one might be Scotty Young. Yeah.
My
After
number
all,
one
I
is
have
is
one
is
tattoo and it's Scotty Young.
and my number one is Scotty Young. So we both knew this was
Scotty.
coming. Let's be honest here. If anybody follows this podcast, we are um we are in the Scotty Young fan club. Like, let's be honest. So like this is so what I'd like to do is, I mean, obviously this is cool. Let's spend some time talking back and forth on why or when. And I'll tell you a little bit of background on me is I hated when I would go to a comic book store. I'll be honest, I used to go to Jeff's at Top Shelf, and nothing really against Jeff. This is not like a trash on Jeff thing. I went to
Yeah.
Paul because I became friends with Paul. I wanted to support a new business. When I go in there, Paul has a conversation with me. Paul's hours at Galactic were turning to be better for me. I was working usually. I used to work like I can go to work for 10 on a Wednesday. When I was going to work at 9, I wouldn't work because Jeff would open at 9, and I couldn't get in there to get my comic books. But I'd also be there past he'd close at 6. So Wednesdays would suck for me. And I'm a big guy that like I have to get my comic books on Wednesday. I gotta do it. I walk in there, I have my pull list from you. But you see me look at the shelf, and there's
Yep.
sometimes a comic book cover pulls me and draws me in, or you had ordered a second order of the Carnage cover.
Yep.
That I was like, oh, you got more of those. And so I gotta be there on Wednesdays. If not, I'm gonna lose out. So it hurt me a couple times when I sent my wife to your shop to pick up my books, because there's a couple times there I was like, oh,
You got just the pull list.
but I go there and Jeff would pull the Scotty Young cover for me, not on purpose, just because he ran out of the other covers, and I always wanted cover A, and I'd get Scotty Young's cover, and I'd be like, God damn it, I wanted the real one, I wanted the actual cover, and then a switch flipped on me. It became to the point where um Scotty will always be. I don't know another person who will do a better cover for me. And it's the child part of me. It's the simplicity part of it. It's the taking something that's real and making a kid version of it in a sense, but not. He's like making it's like something that's made for a kid, but they made it really adult, if that makes any sense. Like if they took Ronald McDonald, they made a horror movie on on Hulu. He does that for you because
Terrifying shit.
his Scotty Young does. If anybody doesn't know Scotty Young, Scotty does what's called what we would say baby variants. Marvel calls them. They don't call him baby. They don't like the word baby. I forget what they call them. They call him something else. If you actually look up what they name of it, he did an interview at one point. He's like, they don't like it called baby variants. But they look like kids. They look like like
Yeah.
young kids, infants or toddlers. But the bubbles say adult themed jokes, like not deep, like dark, but like they're not saying goo goo gaga. They're not saying pull my finger. It's like there's some jokes in there. You're like, damn, I can't believe you went there.
Yeah, like Weapon X there. It's like, can't you put some clothes on a Bob?
Yes,
You
see, and
know?
that's the idea. So like it's a kid, but it's not, and it brings the kid out in me. But I also think that his artwork is just as good in black and white as it is in color. And that's
Yeah,
the other reason why I love Scotty Young. So Scotty Young's
I
work
see
is
that.
so simple. It's so simple, it's annoying because I feel like I could draw it so easily. And that's the problem with it too. So there's a little bit of touch. We'll go back and forth on this, but I will say there's literally just a day where it was like, boop, oh my God, this guy's amazing. I want everything he's ever drawn. I want an original piece of artwork, but I can't spend $3,000 on it. And I want,
Same boat. Still trying to figure that one out.
and so you and I go back and forth on who has more covers. We text each other a lot. You get the
I
comic
do.
book cover. Yes, exactly. Barely now though. I'm catching up.
Yes, you are.
And I get screwed as a fan when your comic book store owner that you go to is also the fan of the same thing. Is that I get the leftovers. But I will say you have my back. I guarantee you, I'm one of the first people you contact when you get a Scotty Young cover that you already
Me
have in your
first.
your collection, and
Yep.
you go to me. So, like you said, you're the guy that buys the black and white Spawn comic books. I am your Scotty Young version of that, and
Yep.
I appreciate that. If anybody hasn't, just Google Scotty with a K, Skottie Young. Uh, Literally some of the most fun comic book covers you'll ever see. And
Hardcore.
that's me just talking about his Marvel variants and his Image variants and his other variants. He also has
Yep.
an unbelievable series as one of your favorite series, and I'll let you talk about that.
Yeah.
And I Hate Fairyland.
I hate Fairyland. I recommend it to everybody that comes in here. If they're looking for something different, if they're looking for something fun, if they're looking for something unique, I hate Fairyland. It is. I always describe it as a demented version of Calvin and Hobbes. If you read Calvin and
Yes,
Hobbes as younger, I read Calvin and Hobbes as a kid. I absolutely loved it. I own every Calvin and Hobbes book there is, and that's the best way to describe I hate Fairyland. I actually, so this is will probably surprise you. I don't have an I Hate Fairyland cover in my personal collection yet, and that is going to be my next. Is I'm going to be doing the I Hate Fairyland variant covers. I don't want to do the base covers. I want to do the variants, and I'm going
I
to start
have.
that
I'm
soon.
missing number one of them. That's it. Because he didn't go long on that one. Surprisingly, he didn't go long on that one.
Yeah,
Like we mentioned earlier, there's people who should stay in their lane. Scotty Young can do both. He can write
yeah, very much.
and he can actually draw. So
Yep,
I'm only missing one. But yes, there's the eye. I would try to make this as clean as possible, but I'm gonna say it here. This is
yep,
what was it? Fuck Fairyland
yep.
is the variant covers. And he also does Middle West, which is also really amazing. Again,
Very good
I don't
series.
anything he touches, and Strange Academy is if anybody out there likes Harry Potter and they like Marvel comic books,
Best way to
you
describe it.
absolutely love Strange Academy because it's
Yep,
basically Harry Potter meets the Marvel universe.
yep.
There's nothing he can do wrong. Again, I don't want to like fanboy over him, but like I just have anything he touches is amazing. And you have one, and you have another appointment.
Yeah, I actually have four more. I have four right now
I now have
scheduled.
four too, but I've got so this is my most recent I've been seeing. I got Nova
Yep,
here.
we got
I've
Nova.
got the Run the Jewels variant here. My watch is the Nova variant.
I've got.
Yeah.
I'm currently rocking the 2099 Spider-Man.
See, and that's so I've got that cover signed. I'm just
Yep.
saying we're gonna go who's is bigger here in a second. I got this sign, you got this, you got I got this here. Oh, hold on.
Yeah, I've got my first and only thus far. I have that. I actually, so I have a large collection of Scotty Young statues in my
Yeah.
personal collection.
But
So
yeah,
a
so
little bit.
so while you're getting whatever you're over there, it's there's something about yeah, see? And I have a whole obviously all of them are right here.
Yeah,
And they're just I got my Stanley cover, which I think you have signed, right?
I have signed by Stan. Yep, that
Yeah.
was
So
when I said, okay, I'm going to meet Stanley. I'm going to get his autograph. What am I going to get signed? It was the Scotty Young Stanley cover because I mean, it's amazing. That is what comics are, right? That's
right
what it's
there.
all about. So
And if
that's what
anybody's
Scotty
watching this
brings
on
to me.
YouTube, this is what it is. It's this cartoonish fun. Like I mentioned, I showed you this one too, and he just showed you one. If you look at
Yep,
this is the Fantastic Four. But this is the black and white version. It's like, look at that. Like that's to me is like it's just as characteristic, it's
yep,
just as good in art, it's just as good at everything, and it's black and white. It doesn't need to be
yep.
color.
Nope.
And
Well, I will say the oh my gosh, the Gwenpool one
oh,
is super fun in color with the pink and the yellow,
hmm
and she's slurping from like like a big gulp, and it looks like there's like the big gulp leaking is pink everywhere, but it looks like blood.
And so
That's
also
a fun one.
follow
You got a sword
Scotty's,
covered in it.
I think it's at Scotty Young, honestly, on Instagram. He does
Yep.
daily sketches and all these other things. He shows you his art. It's the lines are great. The like I said, to me, it's that thing that brings me back to watching a cartoon, but it also has this like adultness to it. It's like you
Yep.
couldn't just be like, if he ever drew a cartoon for Hulu or something like that, likely I would think it would be on that borderline where it'd be like, my kid's not old enough yet.
Yeah.
And that's where Scotty would be. I mean, think about it. I Hate Fairyland. I Hate Fairyland would be a freaking amazing Hulu show.
It'd be so good.
Like it's
When
the
people get
idea.
enough
We've
of it.
talked about this because
Not
it's
gonna let my
one of your
kids
favorite
watch it.
story arcs. What was
Yeah.
that?
Oh, I love it.
And,
So a little bit on Scotty. So this is early work. That's some early Scotty. And then he does his baby stuff, which I had the cat back here on that I showed earlier. So for me, I was always a DC guy, right? You know, I was a big DC guy, and then I started getting into collecting some Marvel stuff, reading more Marvel stuff, and then I got into collecting variants. And when I saw Scotty's work, I became absolutely hooked. It's fun. It's the child thing. It brings me back to my childhood. Why do we collect comics, right? Most comic collectors that are true readers and passionate fans of comics read them as kids, and it brings me back to my childhood. It's the superheroes. It's how my little friends and I were pretending we're superheroes outside, annoying the neighbors, acting like idiots, and that's what his art is. It's these kids, dress up. This is Cap. If you don't clean your room, you're not going to play with the little Avenger Club. That's what it is. It's those fun little bits of our childhood coming back, and that's why I love Scotty's work in that, and I love I Hate Fairyland with it. Middle West is definitely a deeper series. It
Yes, it
surprised
is.
me. It's a darker storyline about what it's about, but it is phenomenal. The work that's involved in it is terrific.
And
So
so,
that's why
like you
Scotty's
mentioned
my
about the kid thing, but I obviously, like you mentioned it, his start, like
yeah
this is unbelievable. And it's
yeah
not kid. And so, what I was saying about Alex Ross earlier, and you mentioned too about the realistic thing, is he's also a one trick pony,
mm,
right? If you think about Alex Ross,
yeah.
again, this is not to
That's what
diminish what
Alex
his
does.
artwork is. Does paint artwork, and that's what he
That's
does.
what he does. Yeah, there's no
If
other
Marvel
ifs
looked
ands
at
buts.
Scott and was like, "Hey, can you do a cover like Venom again?" He would be able to do it. He
Yeah,
also did the manga Spider Clan
yeah,
back in the day. He
good
also
stuff.
did Iceman. He did, and then this is a Human Torch. So this is where I got started going into that more like childish-ish.
Yep,
But he had that. He has that. He's a multiple trick pony. Like I said, he could do multiple things. It's not just um, the kid or the child, the baby versions of the covers. He can draw. It's just this is where he found his niche, and now literally all he does is writes Strange Academy.
yep,
He's the author in Strange Academy. And does variant covers.
yeah.
That's his thing. Like he
And I
doesn't
can't
have
get
to
enough
do
of them.
anything else. It's crazy. And I thought when I started the collection that I was gonna be able to get all of them. I felt like, okay, I'm gonna be able to collect them all. I'm gonna be able to
Yeah.
Pokemon this one. I'm gonna collect them all. And then you start trying, like, I was like, oh, I'll make a list and I'll start checking it off.
Yeah,
It's infinite
deep.
number of.
It
It's
is deep.
so deep. And now I kick
Yep.
myself for being pissed about wanting to get the Scotty Young covers to the point where now I'm like, oh, should have taken them the whole time because there's
Well,
so many of them.
I I uh,
And
I should have brought my Venom pool with me when I just got my Venom pool. That was one of the iconic covers. The What If Venom pool.
yep,
I finally added to my collection. I decided to pony up. I had sold some of my personal hockey collection off, and I said I'm gonna get something really special for myself, and it's got to be Scotty. So I got the What If Venom pool, 9.8 graded. So it's a perfect pristine cover,
yep.
and that's what I decided to add to my personal collection because it's
This
one of
one,
those things.
that's the
Yeah,
one to me. And that's not, I'm a big Run the Jewels fan. That's the reason why that one is. There's definitely a number
yeah,
of covers. Honestly, this was one of them
Yeah.
And then the
There's
this is
actually a
another
black
one.
and white version of that too that I
I
need to
know
add to my
it was
collection.
the second. This was the second print, or that was the second print. There was one of the two.
The black and white was a limited print. I think there's only like
Okay,
250 copies or something. It's something psychotic that like for
and
either
then
of us
this
to add
one.
it to our collection is gonna hurt. But
This one was the
I don't
other
have
one
that
that
one.
that was amazing, and I ended up getting it signed with the certificate of authenticity, obviously.
Yep.
On it, it was from C2E2 2019.
Nice.
But those are ones that I was like, okay, I want. But this is the one because of the tattoo on me, because of my love for Run the Jewels, the band, but also because it's super freaking rare. But it's like it's the same thing I'd have to
Very
do with
rare.
what you do. It's I'd have to pony up the. I mean, honestly, this issue cover on eBay right now, a 9.8 graded, is going for 700. Yeah, and it's like it's one of those things that's like it's gonna have to happen someday, but it's just
Someday.
not in the books right now,
Yep.
and
Someday.
we'll figure it
Someday.
out at
I'm
some
here waiting.
point. But that was my second tattoo. Was this one? It was
That's
my
nice, man.
Stan Lee one, and then it was that one, and it was like I have to get this done because I love Run the Jewels. I think they're some of the greatest rappers of all time. And I love Scotty Young, and it made my love for him to, Then I got my Nova, and then I'm gonna get one filling in here in May 12th, and I'll get more Scotty. I think this arm
All
was
right. So
supposed to
so
be.
what's filling in? Do you know?
So I back and forth on it. There was two that I was. It was the 50 Goes West, 50 from the
Yeah, that
movie
was
50
that
Goes
was the one
West.
that you mentioned
That
to
was
me.
up there, but I also found a couple. It's the cover with Spider-Man is being taken over by Venom.
Yes.
That one also seems like it might fit in that spot, so it might actually be a cool version. I thought maybe I'll stick with mostly Marvel
I've been
if I
very
go in
back
that
and forth
spot.
on getting that one myself. Yep. So
And
now we
so
have to
I
figure out
think,
who's gonna get that one, if it's gonna be you or me.
well, maybe
So
we'll do it. If we do the
I was
stencil,
all
maybe we go
about
at the same time and get it. We'll do this little like
oh, there we go.
mandate.
I like that plan.
Like our schedules would ever work, that Jay would be available at the same time you and I were available.
I think Jay could work with us on this. Come on, man,
Yeah.
help us out. So I was gonna do my next one was gonna be the flipping Deadpool. I wanted to do the upside down version with him shooting, but before that, I realized and I couldn't believe it. The cover that got me was the Galactus, the Silver Surfer
Yeah.
#1 cover, and I realized in all of my Scotty Young collecting, I didn't have it. I was like, how the hell do I not own this book? So I went out that night and I got it, and I got a signed copy. So I add that to my collection, and that's gonna be my next one. Is gonna be Galactus. It's him sitting like Indian style with the earth split open. And he's eating the cereal bowl.
Cereal bowl out of it. I
Yeah,
love it.
I love it. It's so much fun. And Silver Surfer's in the corner going, ew. I'm gonna leave out Surfer for room space because I need to make sure Deadpool fits in there over it. But that's gonna be my next one. Is gonna
And
be
I've always wanted to
Galactus.
Spawn. I mean, Spawn was my number one fan. Like Spawn was the number one for me all the
That's
years.
I think Spawn's going on my entire
Well,
left
so
arm.
I thought, I was like, oh, but how can I? And this is nothing against. How can I get a Spawn tattoo that's not done by Todd McFarlane? Like that to me is one of those weird things. But I would do. He did it for the number 250
Yep.
for Spawn.
Yep.
I would
It's a
do
gorgeous
his
cover.
version of Spawn. It
Yep.
would be fun to do that kind of thing. But
I
again, to
love that
me, it's like
cover.
for my love for Spawn, and he's my number 2 favorite artist of all time. I
Yep.
think I have to get a Spawn tattoo that's done by Todd McFarlane. I just have to. I don't think I could ever get one that's not done by him. But I think
I
that
actually,
Jay, our tattoo artist, our common
yep.
tattoo artist, loves the fact that he talks about you and I, about how he'd love to just literally tattoo you and I. If we had infinite number of money and he had the ability to put it in the schedule, we
Yep.
talked pre-recording. You've got 4 or 5 appointments. I've got 4 or 5 appointments set up. That he's that says something. I think also Jay understands. He loves doing his art. Jay
Yep.
is an artist himself. He can draw himself. He can do it himself. But he's like, if I'm gonna tattoo something, I might as well tattoo someone who's actually good at art as well. And I think it's why he loves doing Scotty Young as well, because he's like, I can do this. This is cool. I like doing this art.
It's neat. It's fun. It's all the details. All this, the small details that are added. Those little things. You know, when he went back and did my Spider-Man, he was like, "Oh, I gotta wait. There's a little spot of webbing I missed on his belt. I gotta make sure that gets in there." You know, and for something that is supposed to be child,
Yep.
like it is also heavily detailed. You know, I mean, looking at the cap room, you know, there's all kinds of these little extra add-ons in that bedroom, you know, that are put in there.
And so Paul and I could likely talk for hours. So it won't be the next episode, I don't think. I think we'll wait one more. But what I wanted to get done, and the reason why I want to do this episode now is to do our top artists so that we can actually fanboy over Scotty Young a little bit more. That I think we'll do one other one that's something else. And then the next one will be our top 10 favorite Scotty Young covers.
Great.
I think it has to happen. I think let's do our top 10 favorite Scotty Young covers that are done at Marvel variants, because then it weeds it down a little bit more.
It gets
There's not many options otherwise. Every comic cover he's ever done, I'll collect and I like.
Yep.
But like I just bought the Goon and I had the Spawn one and stuff like that. I just think we should do a favorite
in my collection. Yep.
Marvel variant covers works. And that includes, he just did an Alien cover. He's done Star Wars covers. Anything that's printed by the Marvel imprint, I think would work. But we'll do that. I think we'll do one more so there's not back-to-back artwork ones, and then we'll get into it. So I think 2 episodes from now, we'll do our top 10 favorite Scotty Young covers. And maybe we're big enough by that Scotty Young will come on. I don't know, but I think that's cool. I think it'd be fun to do that,
buddy. The hopes and the dreams.
And there also could be one of those things that I also talked about. Maybe we do it if you have to own the cover to say it's your favorite cover, or not your favorite cover. But our top 10 favorite covers that we own, each of us. That could work too.
I
so
like
that you
that.
actually,
cool.
I think that's cool too. You have to own it to actually make it into your list.
Thankfully, now that I have that Galactus, I think I have I would have all of my top 10.
We just talked about how hard this episode was. You know how hard it's going to be for us to whittle down to 10 covers.
So what are you at right now? I can't remember what I was at.
It was 120 something, 100.
Yeah, and I must be at
100. You're right ahead of me. It's not like
130, 140 somewhere.
Yeah, something like that. And I'm at like 120 or 125.
So we have to go through 130, 100.
Exactly. And there's definitely ones that I own because they're Scotty Young. There's definitely ones I own, and there's one right here, 1872.
Yep.
Like, this is fun. I like this. I own it. It's great. It's not one of my top 10 for sure.
No.
So there's definitely going to be ones that are not going to make it. I just own them because I own them. But there's definitely ones that, like, I have them displayed in these little totes on a shelf, and there's ones that I push towards the front, so I look at them first. And those are the ones that are in that top 10.
Awesome.
If I buy them, a lot of times they may be the ones that I'm signed, because I usually buy them signed or get them signed. And so Scotty's another one of those people that is very good to his fans. You go to his website, you can buy his stuff directly from his site for not that. Literally, I mean, I can go to your shop and buy his variant cover from your shelf for $20 if you have like an aftermarket, not like the day it comes out.
Right.
Or I can buy it from his website for $25 signed. And it's like, okay, cool. I'll buy the signed one. And I know it's coming from his website. It's gonna be signed by him.
Yeah.
Some sort of like, So he's another one of those people that I think when we hopefully meet him at someday, he's gonna be like my George Perez experience, or other experiences we've had meeting artists. So I think
I can only imagine as an artist to meet someone that has your artwork on their body. You got to give them a little prop over the average.
This right here, this space right here, it's being saved. Scotty Young's signature right here in some ink, and then I'm gonna go right that next day to Jay's spot and have him tattoo it.
I'm doing the same thing, except I plan on doing the Scotty selfie that he has of himself with the hands out at the top of my shoulder, and him signed underneath, and then all Scotty down.
This is also one of the ones I might do. It's his newest one. So it's on my phone. That's how much of a freaking nerd I am about Scotty Young. I think I typed the word Scotty Young into Google search way too much. I think it may be one of those things that there may be a red alert out there.
There's probably a red flag against you.
Again, I think we'll go back to the simpleness of it. I think it's simple lines, simple drawing, childish. It brings us back to our childhood.
Fun.
It's fun. It's different. It's the variant covers. Some of these variant covers can get really obscure. These variant covers are definitely well worth it. They're just not. Yeah, see, Star Wars. So as we finish this episode up, I got tattooed by Jay a couple weeks ago, and we were wondering how you let him buy that Star Wars variant signed by all those people off of Will, and you did not get it. How did you let that happen? He almost feels bad about it. He almost feels like, why did I steal this from Paul?
That's a two-parter. Okay. So part number one, at the time, I wasn't doing Star Wars. I did Marvel characters only.
Only.
Only had to be Marvel character, superhero. Well, you know, I had to be superhero character. Let's say. You know, I wasn't Star Wars. I kind of written off to its own thing. So at the time, I wasn't doing Star Wars, which I am now. But at the time, I wasn't. So it was a little easier to let it go. And secondly, that did not belong to the store itself. That was a consigner. So even though I should have, looking back now, I should have said, "Hey, man, all right, let me have dibs on this."
Because he has
thing.
it hanging up in his tattoo studio, and I'm
But
looking
you know
at
what?
it. I'm
That's
like,
beautiful, man. That's great.
no, I'm glad. I'm glad he
favorite
owns
artist
it, not someone
runs
else.
his
But my
studio.
point was, I was pissed that I didn't buy it. And then I'm like, then I like went to the next level. I'm like, how the hell did Paul not buy it?
Yeah.
And Jay goes,
Yeah.
I have no idea. I got that for a steal. And I'm like,
oh yeah, he did too. Yeah, he stole that thing.
and he didn't feel bad because he definitely paid for it for slightly more than what Will paid for it. So there is that aspect. He knows he didn't get ripped off. He knows Will didn't get ripped off.
No, and I took care.
We're talking about Will. Will's our buddy who owns Comic Con.
Yep.
Will and Jay own Comic Con in Bangor. Will was done with this book, which is all of us. We all have those books. Will is not a diehard Scotty Young fan like we are, and they're definitely books that, like, you know, I just
nor is he a diehard Star Wars fan like Jay.
Correct. So, and that's I looked at my comic book collection the other day, and I was like, I have the first appearance of Domino. I'm ready to move on from it. I don't care about that as much anymore. If anybody wants to buy first appearance of Domino from me, X-Force, you can buy it. Cool. That's where Will was at. And it just happened to be that the two biggest Scotty Young collectors in the greater Bangor area somehow missed out on this.
It was in my hand.
If you ever get a tattoo at Fort Castle Tattoo from Jay Cochran, it's hanging on the wall. Pay homage. He got that book over both of us.
Neither of us have it.
Hey, I have a message. If you go back further on Will, hey Will, Justin, you want to buy this? I'm like, not right now. I don't know.
And those were the early days of Galactic. I don't even know if you were coming here then. I don't think I.
No, I don't think so. But Will and I have been friends for years. So if anybody doesn't, we're kind of like obscure with this, but it was signed by Peter Mayhew.
Yeah, which is huge.
Is it signed by Scotty too?
Yep.
And
Jason Aaron.
Yes.
Yep.
So the three, and one of those guys is dead.
Yep.
So you can't get a signature anymore from it. It's a trifecta. It's not. Is it graded? It's graded too.
Slab 9.8. It's a yellow label slab 9.8. Peter Mayhew, Scotty Young, Jason Aaron.
So Jay, I'll pay $20.
Me first.
Me. Jay, I've known you longer.
Podcast, like, are these two idiots ever gonna shut up?
Jay, I've known you longer. Just let you know, I know you longer.
Star Wars, dude. I'm your hookup for Star Wars.
I got tattooed before Paul did from you. So Jay owns, just to let everybody know, Comic-Con is coming up soon too. Let's give a shout out to that. I think, are you on next week too?
Yes, I'm on next week too. Yeah.
Oh, next week. We're recording this Thursday. This comes out Wednesday. We're actually on tomorrow night. It's technically tomorrow night.
Yeah.
When this podcast get released. Don't cross the streams on the Bangor Comic and Toy Con Facebook page. Paul will be on, myself and Bob Raymond.
Yeah, Bob Raymond.
Will and Jay from Comic Con. We mentioned Jay. Jay is also a tattoo artist at Forecast Tattoo. If you're in the greater Bangor area, book your tattoo for 2027. He has no appointments right now, but it's great. If you want to get on the books, he's an unbelievable tattoo artist.
Support Jay, he's phenomenal.
Support him. If you take a tattoo appointment from me, I'm not going to be pissed. Jay deserves it. He's an unbelievable person, unbelievable tattoo artist. Will's great too. Will's amazing. They both own Comic-Con.
Will helps me out so much at the store. Thank you, Will, for all your help, your support.
Double his salary. And so those are the two guys I just mentioned. If you don't know those guys are great. Follow the Bangor Comic and Toy Con. Paul will be there set up, directing people to his store. OBC will have a bar there set up this year. We're at the Bangor Mall, October 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. Or yeah, right? First weekend in October. And so check it out. If you're in the greater Bangor area, if you're in all of Maine, you've got to come to this Bangor Comic and Toy Con. It's super fun. The guys from Clerks are going to be there this year. There's gonna be many more people. I guess some more people being announced.
There's a bunch of horror guests coming, which is
It's gonna be
perfect for October.
fun. It's gonna be so
Yep.
much fun. I cannot wait. You can buy OBC beer. You can see Paul and the Galactic Comics crew there. Um, the guys from Clerks is gonna be great. It's gonna be. I cannot wait. I can't believe it's so far away. It's
I
5 months
know.
away or 4 months away. I can't wait. Bangor Mall again. When's the last time you did anything cool at the mall, man? Like this is a.
2003. I'm gonna throw it a guess. I'm gonna say 03.
I
I'm gonna
was
say
probably
03.
2004. I was a senior in high school. But
So
yeah, so
Strawberries closed, and I bought my JVC Kaboom box. It's actually behind me right now at the store. I got my
so it's at
Kaboom
a
box
mall.
3.
And the same guys that were also in Mall Rats. It's gonna be badass. So I cannot wait for that.
Awesome.
Let's do a quick rundown of your list if you remember what it
Yeah.
is for top 10. And then we'll close this thing out so that my wife doesn't kill me. And
Same.
I'm glad we're on the same page with this part of it, at least.
Yeah.
With the but why don't you give a rundown on your 10 through 1?
All right, 10 through 1. I go with Jim Lee, Alex Ross, Frank Miller, Larry Hama, Adam Kubert, Neil Adams, Tim Sale, Gabriel Delato, Francesco Mattina, and because of our absolute undying love of Scotty Young's artwork.
Scotty will take anything you want. Number 10 for me is Charlie Adler, Walking Dead. Or sorry, I don't have to say those things. Charlie Adler, number 10. Greg Capullo, number 9. Number 8 is John Romita Jr. Number 7 is Sarah Pacelli. Number 6 is George Lopez. Number 5 is Michael Del Mundo. Can't speak right now. Number 4 is Alex Ross. Number 3 is Ben Bishop. Number 2 is Todd McFarlane. Number 1 is Scotty Young. Finishing that out. What I will say is to add to that, Ben Bishop will also be there, which would be kind of cool at the Bangor Comic Con. And it's cool. Pick up his issue. Go to his website too, bishart.net. Purchase his stuff. Again, I'm doing this he's not paying me for this. He's not doing anything. He's a local guy. He's from Westbrook. We're living in the greater Bangor area. He's from Maine. He deserves all the credit. He's number 3 on my list. Legitimately. He's not number 3 on my list because he's from Maine or I know him. He's number 3 on my list because he's legitimately a good guy, or a good drawer. But he's a phenomenal guy. So check out bishart.net.
Yep. So I didn't get a chance to mention my quick drops here.
Oh yes. Yeah.
I love Jock. So I got Jock on there. Jay Lee, who I met at Boston Comic Con. He's an amazing artist. He's a great guy. He was phenomenal. Art Germ does some incredible work. I got Adam Kubert, Adam Hughes, Steve Ditka, and Jack Kirby. Because so I had such a hard time, right? How do you not put those people on a list? But then at the same time, they're so far beyond my age and my ability to even.
But that's the thing we talk about at Orna Brewing Company when people ask me what my favorite beer is and I don't say tubular. Like, how's not tubular? It's your flagship IPA. And I'm like, it's because it is the obvious pick.
Yeah.
Jack Kirby.
It has to be said, right? It has to be said. So I had him on my list and I had him in the top 10. I took him off top 10. And I'm like, realistically, will I ever own a Jack Kirby? No. I'll never own a Jack Kirby. And so I threw him on my honorable mention for the sake of it because how do you know, right?
And my honorable mentions are Lee and Miller, like I mentioned before, and I also had Francisco Mattina on there because of my love for Spawn. But again, I haven't seen bad art for any of these companies that he follows. It's just the art that sticks out to us. So Paul and I will figure out over the next week or so what we're going to do for the next episode of the poll list. But the following episode after that will be top 10 Scotty Young covers that we each own. That will be fun. There are some covers that we both own, but there are also covers that he owns that I don't own, which would be kind of fun to figure out what
at least 15 more.
So he's going to say that. And I was going to give a shout out to freaking Galactic Comics on Hamlin Street in Bangor. If you live in the greater Bangor area, it is the #1 comic book store in the Bangor area. He also has Pokemon cards when they are available, but there's also some pretty high-end cards there as well. Paul has started setting up for CGC. So if you're looking for CGC stuff, he's working on that as well. Back issues, trade paperbacks. He just mentioned manga, some magic cards. You name it.
Board games, vintage toys, new toys. You name it, we do it.
You name it, they got it. If you are nervous about talking about your hobbies to your friends at work, he likely has those hobbies at his store.
Guaranteed.
Guaranteed. So every Wednesday you'll see me there too. If you ever want to stop by and say hi, I usually am there around 5 o'clock when he opens, and I'm there too. So if you want to say hi, obviously follow him on Instagram and Facebook. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook. Like this podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Always fun, man. We could talk for hours. I can't. One of these days we're gonna do this at your shop. We're gonna the Thursday we record. You're gonna close the shop down. We're gonna go in the back room. We're gonna set up the microphones. We're gonna do this in person when this
I love
COVID
that
pandemic is
I
over,
love it.
and we can do it. So we can actually do it. And maybe we'll bring a guest in. Maybe we'll have someone else have a guest top 10 list. Maybe we'll bring Will or Jay in and have them
That'd be
do it,
cool.
or a regular your customer at your store to do that. So go say hi to your family, kiss them, love them, everybody. Stay safe out there, everybody. Again, follow Galactic Comics on Instagram, Facebook, all those places are Galactic Comics. Visit them. They're great. Not just because I like Paul, but they're great. Make it so they
Much
can quit this other
appreciated.
job.
Much appreciated. That's
That's
right.
my goal in life. Make it so Paul can
Galactic
quit his other
Comics,
job.
baby.
You need to
Full
work
time.
one job in your lifetime, and that's the job you're actually happy to be at. So
The one you
Paul's going
love.
to do that. So, but thanks, Paul. I really appreciate it. I'll talk to you
Thanks, John.
soon.